Yes, first.
Hello everyone, Bart Kamp here. It's been a while, about 7 months, 8 months since we spoke last with Malcolm Blunt, and it's July the 12th, and I won't say too much, so we'll let Malcolm do the talking. And so first and most important question is, what have you been up to over the last few months? What have you gone through? And later on we'll go into some documentation. But first we'll just have a loose talk as usual. And so Malcolm, take it away please.
Yeah, I guess on and off I've been working as I have been for the last 6 years on Antonio Veciana, and which is really a different perspective. A different perspective to the stuff we had recently. I think I've seen obviously the work of John Newman, a good friend. He was 180 degrees removed from the way I see Veciana, and also Tracy Parnell, who's done some good work stitching things together. But the problem is the quality of the weave isn't that good, because the wool's not that good. It's not. You can't weave a story unless you know exactly what the story entails. And I think both John and Tracy Parnell are both absent crucial facts. And you can't develop anything if you're absent crucial facts. And I don't blame them, because Antonio Veciana is a really difficult subject. He made it difficult for himself, and he made it difficult for Gate and Ponzi, and he made it difficult for researchers. And that seems to me to be part of his modus operandi.
Can you just go a little bit deeper on what bits you... I'm not saying that, well, I disagree with that, or I disagree, but what do you like? Because just saying absence of some info is one thing, but
well, there's an enormous black hole, which is consistent with the fact that there was operational usage of Veciana by CIA, which is unaccounted for because it's not there on paper, which is a difficult one. But you can see it in a negative template when you dig deep into the official people who were involved with Veciana in CIA, which were a guy called Guy Vitale and Carl Hicks. If you get into the documentation, some of the documentation, particularly for Vitale, you can actually understand what was going on. What I'm seeing there is, with Veciana, is a prescribed and limited operation involving Phillips, which is an unofficial, if you like, an unofficial, not surfaced relationship. And then you have an official relationship, which can be seen in the files, which is Vitale and Hicks. And it's further complicated by the army usage of Veciana, which John Newman uses extensively to say that really Veciana was, he agrees totally with Scott Breckenridge, and Breckenridge writes about this, that Veciana was peripheral, to say the least, with CIA, but his main usage was by the army intelligence. But that's not quite right either. So it's developing this stuff. It's a long, complex business, and it's very slow, incremental. But I think I'm making progress on it.
It was a long winded process.
It's difficult. And as I say, you know, Mr. Veciana doesn't make it easy. Certainly didn't make it easy. But there again, you know, when you try and contact, I tried to contact Antonio Veciana several times, and could never get anything through to him. You know, the stuff came back, mail, letters I sent to him with the correct address, that came back, all came back. So it was very difficult. And the only time I could actually get to speak with Antonio Veciana was at a stage when he was losing the plot, when he was not lucid. And so I didn't go forward with that. In retrospect, maybe I should have done. I don't know.
Hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah. But certainly Marie Fonzi kindly arranged with Mr. Veciana's daughter, Anna, for me to go and see him. But, you know, at the back of my mind I had thoughts of my mother when she was losing her faculties, and we had a lawyer to the house, and then the lawyer was badgering away, and it was very unpleasant. And I didn't think it was right when Anna said that her father was not lucid to proceed.
Is there any documentation still left to hunt for and to get more information regarding Veciana as such? Or
Yes, indeed.
Yeah?
Yes, that's a good point, Bart. One of the main guys with the Select Subcommittee on Intelligence, the church
SSCIA.
Was a guy called Howard Liebengood, and when I was last over in the States, I tried to get access to his files, Howard Liebengood's files. He was the guy that was actually putting Veciana under a close focus. But his papers, although they're donated to the Library of Congress,
Right.
you can't get access. You have to have the family consent. And the Library of Congress wrote on my behalf, but heard nothing back. And I've written a couple of times since. So if anybody's watching this, if they could write to the Library of Congress and G them up about Howard Liebengood's papers, I would desperately like to have a look at any paperwork he's got on Antonio Veciana.
What about military intelligence?
Well, I think we had as much as we got on that. That was the INSCOM files.
Right. Yeah.
Except, with the exception of redactions, there are some redactions in INSCOM files. Some odd pages which relate to Mr. Veciana, which are partially redacted. But we don't know what the redactions are on those.
Right. And then, of course, what I can think of, I mean, I don't know that much about Veciana, but this prison thing he did, the time he did for important large amounts of cocaine.
You know, it was a big thing, you know, because I think John and Dan Hardway were both looking at the fact that he got a very light sentence.
Was it 8 years, something like that?
I think it was less. Was it 7 years?
Oh, right.
Yeah. And
that's still peanuts. Yeah.
You know, for several kilos of cocaine.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense at all. Clearly, somebody was being very kind in helping him.
A friend of the government.
Yeah. I mean, all sorts of interesting coincidences, and you know, the judge in that case was a guy called Judge, I forget the Christian name, but it was Bonsall, whose brother was a senior guy at the State Department at the time, talk about 59, 60, when all the Cuban upheaval was going on. And actually Bonsall was involved in extracting Dave Phillips when he got into trouble with the cattleman. Phillips attended a cattleman's beating, which was very, what I say is like very attack-minded. They wanted to eliminate Fidel Castro, and it was a very conspiratorial meeting that Phillips attended, and there was some problem because they thought the meeting had been bugged by Cuban intelligence
Right.
at that time, so they pulled Phillips out, courtesy of a guy called Jack Malone, who I knew very well from previous research. So Bonsall was the guy, the judge in the case of Veciana. His brother, Phil Bonsall, was the guy that took the message from Dulles to give the details of that cattleman's plot to the Cubans by a guy called Raoul Rose. So in a sense, the plot which resulted in Phillips having to be extracted was betrayed by Dulles. It went to the judge, in other words, the judge in the case, his brother, was involved in that process, the betrayal,
Right.
that caused all the trouble for Phillips, which is a remarkable coincidence.
Like it just happens. And besides Veciana, what else have you been pondering?
I'm still looking at Nosenko, which is a big story, but other people are writing about Nosenko, I think, at the moment. Nosenko and Bagley and stuff like that.
Right, because there's a lot of paperwork on these two, actually. I mean, I found bits in your recent batch that I've been doing, personal letters as such from Pete Bagley.
Oh yeah.
You met him at the Spy Conference.
I did. 2008.
Yeah, the Spy Conference that he was prevented from talking at.
It was prevented from talking at the Spy Museum in Washington.
Right.
And so I think the president of the Association of Former Intelligence Officers at that time was a guy called Jean Petit. And Jean was like outraged because he believes in free speech. So when it was squashed at the Spy Museum in Washington, he said, well, said to Pete, come on down, come on down, do it down here, which he did. That's where I met him, 2008.
Right, okay. Let's talk documents.
I keep coming back to Marchetti stuff.
Okay, Uncle Victor.
If you got Marchetti stuff?
I've got some stuff, yeah.
Because a lot of the stuff is...
and there was some bits that Harry did and you asked me about a week or so ago, remember?
Yeah.
And I'll send you the link to that, but...
Yeah, it's not a great deal.
No.
Not a great deal on that.
What is so special about Victor Marchetti? His insights, huh?
He was really inside, yeah. It's really, it was really as close as you could get to the director.
He understood
the
functionality and the mechanics.
He knew the game, and he's another witness that's remarkably forthright. But we can't get his interview. He did several interviews with the church committee, and one of which you found one for me and gave me the link.
All right.
And it was a different version to the one I copied at the National Archives.
Okay.
It was just a summary.
Glad to be of
A
service.
page and a bit.
Right.
But yours was different
Right.
to the one I had. In other words, the late release, I think you got it from a 2017 release, was more redacted. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, which seems to be a common thing. I don't know. They seem to be just throwing paper out and just doing a con job on people, really.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if we ever discussed this before. We've done it privately, but I don't know on tape. But what the audience needs to understand is that the documents, they were at first vetted by a group of people and redacted and so forth. Of course, these are intelligence officers. But then years later, a whole different bunch of other people are going through it, who probably do not have as much affiliation or knowledge about the actually subject matter at hand, and then basically start redacting stuff that shouldn't be redacted in the first place, or because it wasn't redacted in the first place, and then all of a sudden
I think that's what's going on. You can argue with it that they've got bad intentions, but maybe it's just as you say, they've got a whole new strata of people, of screeners, looking at this stuff, and they haven't got the historical base. They haven't got the knowledge of people that back in the day when they did it. So, but Marchetti, on that one document that you sent to me, and which I've got copies, it's just like a A4 size summary with about 4 lines on the second page. It was from a 4.5 hour interview. 4.5 hours.
That'd be a lot more paper then. That would be 200 pages at least.
Where is Marchetti's stuff? Got none of it.
It's too close to the bone, that's it.
Close to the bone, must be. And anyway, the stuff that he gave to the House Select Committee is pretty interesting. It's quite a bit. And again, I've multiple copied it in case I lost it. But it's interesting stuff because are we allowed to use the 4-letter word? We'll do it. Marchetti was shit on by one of his friends who was working for the agency. A guy that's should be well known to a lot of the deep researchers. You probably won't know. A guy called Dan Flores.
No.
He was a long time covert guy. And whatever Marchetti was telling him in phone conversations, it was going to CIA and betrayal of his buddy, which is like maybe that's a normal thing. I don't know. But so the transcripts of those conversations are in here. You can have that.
Thank you. I always come back with gifts.
A lot of it is in
No, it's cool. I think the people are interested in Marchetti, I know that. So, and I've got this book as well. The book he wrote in the 70s.
I think I gave mine away to you.
And you wanted it back?
I wanted it back, and you sent me a paperback, which was good. Yeah. Apparently more of it's available online now. It's like it's been digitized, and it's there with less redactions than it used to be. So I must take a look at that. I'm told it's online.
Yeah, I think the first time I heard about Marchetti was through Larry Hancock.
You're pronouncing it correctly too. It's Marchetti.
Yeah, Larry Hancock's book. And someone someone? Sorry.
Someone would have talked.
Yeah, someone would have talked. Yeah, that's how I.
A significant witness.
Yeah.
And hours and hours and hours of his interviews missing.
Yeah.
Anyway, this one was I came across it. I thought that's interesting. do you have that, or do you recall it at all? It's a guy called Robert Calisi, who was a citizen that wrote to Harry Livingstone. I saw that on the forum you had some interest in somebody that was talking about the rifle.
Oh, I've read this.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, just basics, and just go like, well, this is what that rifle is capable of, and this, that, and the other, and basically questions them out. Peter, that'd be interesting for you actually.
This is an interesting one because a few years ago I got a request to. Jim Lazar was mixed up in a court case, and the judge was saying there's no proof about CIA use of false passports. Well, there's a bloody document there.
Oh yeah, you did. I scanned this in the other about a week ago, and you made an annotation on it, and it said like, this is evidence of that they request a false passport as such. So
and then they're stonewalling poor Jim in court saying, you know, oh no, don't do anything like that.
Now, this would have
And
been
where's the proof?
yeah.
The judge is asking for the proof. There's a proof.
This would have been great to present during that court case as such. You
But
go,
I sent it to Jim, but did he get it? I have no idea. I sent the document by mail.
you've got a lot of that, don't you? That mail disappears or
Oh, yeah.
doesn't arrive, and
Yeah. I sent 3 huge parcels of documents to Antonio Veciana's solicitor, his lawyer. You know, the guy that was working prior to the book, Trying to Kill. They were, before the book came out. No idea if any of that ever reached him. You know, the writer, Carlos Harrison, I have no idea if any of that reached him.
and in between, what, like your correspondence with Fonzie or anyone else, is stuff disappearing, or Harry Livingston for that matter, as such? Or?
Not so much Harry Livingston. Hemming I used to get terrible problems with. Could never get anything to Jerry Hemming. You know, when I went to Fayetteville one time, stuff. Well, I say some of the stuff did get to him, but always used to arrive. And he showed me some of the bags. It used to come in clear US mail plastic bags, and it said on it, "Damaged in transit."
No, yeah, that one, that old hat.
All that stuff. But I used to get stuff to Jerry in the air. I used to send it to somebody else who would take it when he visited, like once a month.
Intermediary.
Every 6 weeks, yeah, by
good.
hand.
Yeah,
That's the only way I could get stuff.
yeah,
to Jerry.
yeah, I understand, of course.
You know, and when we were talking about, before this started, we were talking about bullhorns and the stuff that people are shouting over each
Yeah.
other. I noticed on the forum that the Prouty and Jones stuff has been resurrected again. Like, you know, these 2 people are full of shit. Well, you know, they ain't. You know, Jones and Prouty were on the money.
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I'm not that deep into it, but I mean, I always said, like, look, Prouty understands the mechanics.
Yeah.
He doesn't know the specifics, but he understands the mechanics. That's the way I look at
I
it.
think if he's guilty of anything, he probably
Speculated a bit too much.
speculated a bit
Yeah.
on the top of it. But he was bang on.
Yeah.
When he talks about the call coming in from the 112th in San Antonio that week to offer protection to protect the president, it's right. You know, and we had the document which you posted from Stephen Weiss.
Yeah.
You know, let's have the history of that document. Let's have the history of that document. It wasn't in the files. 98. No sign of it. Anytime I look back through those files, for 12 years, it didn't arrive into the ARRB files until 2010.
After they tried to interview him, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, that's right. He was interviewed by Dave Montag. He said these things, which are crucial, that they did have a phone call, that they were instructed to try and offer protection for the president, that a Secret Service guy stood up and said, "We don't need any goddamn help." Somebody called Sowers, which was Sorrels, you know. So this stuff is all there, and they're saying, oh well, you know, it never happened. It did happen.
No.
I got a document, but you know, 2 people stonewalled that. 2 people were involved in. They came over with, I would say, extreme bias. Both were Pentagon guys, and their job seems to be to destroy Prouty and to destroy Jones. And they succeeded.
On top of that, I'd like to add, not a lot of people know this, is that, which runs consecutively with what you just said, the FBI was told by the Secret Service as well, don't get involved, don't bother, nobody is supposed to do anything when it comes to security around the president and so forth. This was done in a meeting in the morning of the 22nd. They were told again not to get involved as such. That's in Hostie's book, if I'm not mistaken. And Decker said the same thing. Decker said, like, you boys don't, on the morning briefing as well when the president came around, that part of it has been taken care of. The Secret Service does not want anyone to be involved as such. So it wasn't just the 112th, it was also the FBI and the Dallas Sheriff as well. I mean, the Dallas Sheriff, even when it came to the investigation of the whole thing afterwards, Decker said, just take statements, do what Dallas Police tells you to do, and that's it. Other than that, do not go play a John Rambo thing and go on your own and start investigating as such. And that's what got Roger Craig, for instance, into deep water as well, with Decker and so forth afterwards, basically because he kept opening his mouth about and investigating as such.
But you know, the big sort of cry we get about Jones is he made up the fact that he was a operations officer, you know, and there's his document 13 days after the assassination, and there's a Secret Service guy calling in to the 112th group in San Antonio to speak to Robert Jones, Colonel Jones.
Yeah, Robert E. Jones.
And he gets to the Intelligence Corps office, and Jones is out the office, but he speaks to the sort of operations officer standing in, who said they had not furnished any information to the FBI regarding Anna J. Heidel.
Oh yeah, that old hat.
Yeah. But the important thing on the document is Jones was in the Intelligence Corps office working alongside an operations officer. And that's the operation officer was Major James R. Mullins. So, and what we get, of course, is if you, I don't know if you do you remember copying handbooks of the 316th Intelligence Unit?
I'd have to check that. I
Because,
might have.
I remember there were pages in there where intelligence officers were expected to wear more than one hat. So in other words, logically, if a guy had flu or he was ill or whatever, they could take on another role. I mean, that makes sense to me. And what I think happened was that at the time of the assassination, this is probably what happened with Jones. He was in the Intelligence Corps office as an operations officer, maybe standing in for somebody that was absent. But these documents that, you know, nobody seems to take any notice of. And Dave Montag interviewed Ed Coyle, who was you know, and
Coyle and Hosty.
You got that one as a handwritten one?
No, I don't know. I don't think
Dave
so.
Montag. And
Coyle was
handwritten
with
notes, and he says that Dave mentioned that he spoke to Ed Coyle in Las Vegas, and Ed confirmed that a U.S. a Secret Service agent said that he didn't need Army backup or OSI or anyone other than the Dallas Police Department.
Coyle was with Hosty when the shooting was happening.
Yeah.
They crossed the road and they went, oh dear.
So, you know, again, this idea that there was no effort from Army intelligence to get involved is plain wrong.
And they were still there because of what's his name who took the picture.
But you know, the whole thing is that, you know, this is a concoction by Prouty and Jones. It's not a concoction. They did it. Stephen Weiss is the witness to it. He was there. You know. But the interesting thing is, why didn't the review board? He got. If you read the Stephen Weiss document, he started to talk about other things, about the Warren Commission, meeting people and saying, you know, the way the Warren Commission had been subverted and their conclusions and all the rest of it. But then he stopped talking, and then he didn't want to talk any further. But they should have subpoenaed him. He was a crucial witness. A crucial witness. He's never subpoenaed. His documents disappear. And all we're left is with Tim Ray and Chris Barger's hatchet job on Prouty and on Jones. I don't think it's coincidental that the Stephen Wise document disappeared for 12 years. You tell me about that.
Yeah.
It's crucial stuff.
Yeah.
In understanding what's going on, because if that stuff is kept out of the light, then you get this ability to diminish the credibility of Jones and Prouty.
I'll tell you what, I've got one issue with Jones, and that's because for me Jones is pivotal in the Heidel ID matter. And he never mentions the so-called police officer that calls him and basically the Heidel thing. Not once in any of the testimonies, because I think he did at least 2, if not 3, interviews with the HSCA. And he never mentions it. A lot of people think it's Don Stringfellow, but that's not the case.
Yeah, I thought that for some reason.
Stringfellow doesn't get into the picture until that evening when they send a telex, and that's when his name is mentioned, and also the term card-carrying communist was basically brought up. And again, Jones doesn't put a lot of weight on that during his interview as such, but the name of the actual police officer who makes the phone call at around the time that Oswald has just been arrested and brought in, and the identity of that particular person is not known. Now, that would have been great, but that's like with many other things, nobody knows the source of actually where it's coming from. It's the same as the so-called APB on Oswald, because they've got one on Charles Douglas Givens, the name and the height, etc., and the weight exactly as it is, whereas the one on Oswald doesn't have his name involved, the height is wrong, the age is wrong, and so forth, and the weight is wrong. But where they're specific with Charles Douglas Givens as such, and who is actually the source of the so-called shooter or the person that ran away from that building, nobody knows. People think it was Howard Brennan, but still it's just not confirmed in any way whatsoever. And so he can also not give you the source of the person that made that phone call to the 112th and spoke to Robert E. Jones. But hey, c'est la vie.
Yeah, I mean that's what. Well, of course, like Jones should have been called as a witness in a Warren Commission.
But that's another thing. Nothing from military intel was submitted by the FBI. I mean, the FBI had all the documents, but they didn't submit one shred of it to the Warren Commission. The stuff didn't come out until the HSCA, and that's thanks to Paul Hodge, because he started bringing all that stuff up and brought it forward and so forth. And the same with the ARB. They started actually looking deeper into the matter as such. But the Warren Commission was just, well, either blasé or just fully ignorant or just kept ignorant by the FBI as such. I mean, take your pick on that one, but, you know.
Yeah, of course, the military intelligence file was hid. It wasn't given. Rankin did ask for it at least 2 occasions, maybe 3 occasions.
Right.
Asked for the military intelligence, but never got it. Didn't get it, and then it was, so say, routinely destroyed. It was 1973 when Paul Hope got into all that and did a great job of exposing all that stuff.
Yeah. Bringing it out in the open. Yeah,
sure.
That's true. And it would have complicated matters, of course, a lot more if the Warren Commission got involved as such.
Yeah.
You know.
Some of these things have just got to be deep sexed, I suppose. It's a bit like the post-defection investigation by Fred Reeves. It's that's an extraordinary moment. And it's what they should have done. Absolutely, here's this guy defecting in Moscow, and he's been at a top secret base. what else does he know?
Yeah.
What does he know? What secrets is he exposing to?
They would have done their job actually if they did that.
Of course,
because that's what they are for.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Fred said that. It's exactly what he said. You know, he was instructed by Admiral Taylor to launch an investigation, do a post-evacuation investigation, which they deny. ONI always denied that. Deny. But you know,
Yeah.
it's confirmed. I mean, I think Bill Kelly got an interview with one particular guy in Dallas that was in the same office as Fred Reeves, and he absolutely confirms there was a post-evacuation investigation. But that's what we lose on the way. You know? That's the sort of stuff we lose.
That's the meat and potatoes you actually want to get your hands on.
It's a miracle we got anything, really. It's a miracle.
Yeah, I mean, I lambast America and Americans a lot, but I've got to give them that the fact that you do get access to a lot of material, and you know, you can go to the archive. Not that a lot of researchers do, but basically you can go to the archive and you can, you know, try and get hold of these papers and so forth, and you know, the amount of paperwork that is actually available for the average citizen to go through. You know, if I compare that to say anywhere in Europe or in England as such, where things are just basically dumped in a drawer and forgotten about, or put in some mountain somewhere, you know, even if it's 100 years old, because some family with status, some duke of some sort who did something stupid about 100 years ago during the First World War, to keep that basically secret as such. But yeah, in the States, you know, in the archives you can get hold of a lot of material, and yeah, it shows because we got millions of pages. So.
Or Jack the Ripper.
Yeah, yeah, Jack the Ripper, same thing. Yeah. Yeah.
There's loads of stuff that I think is I don't think we'll ever see.
Yeah. What's next?
This is internal search for files inside the Department of Justice. I'm not sure how much of this stuff ever reached into the National Archives, if it ever got there. It's an interesting selection of stuff.
I've got to admit, you've got a lot of this type of materials, these so-called finder's aids and searches.
If people got enough time to look.
Yeah, yeah, no, but I mean, that is just like for future generations of people that are actually wanting to find out and trying to find certain documents as such. I would suggest you go through the finder's aids. There's a chapter in the archives called NARA, and if you go in there, there's a folder that's called finding aids or records. And these are all like documents with, I don't know, anything between 2 and 20 odd pages, where basically a lot of records are listed as such, and they got annotations from you, and there's things that are disappeared and question marks, and you know, just bits like that. That by itself is a mission for the rest of your life if you want to go into that, because there's just so much material. You know, even if you want to do a checks and balances thing of what's around and what's disappeared, you'll probably depress the living daylights out of you, because a lot of stuff has gone.
You know, there are some disappointments. I mean, one of the archivists, it was enormously helpful to me, did a not such a good thing when he interfiled all the redacted documents, all the previously withdrawn documents that were part of the Warren Commission files. And I think there were thousands of documents. It took him almost 2 years, maybe more, to put them into. You have to realise that the Warren Commission collection is over 400 boxes, and then some big ones as well, what they call FRCs, big ones.
What is FRCs?
Federal Record Collector boxes.
Right.
Yeah, FRCs are big boxes.
Gotcha.
And so he did that massive job of interfiling, but he didn't leave a bloody index.
Just like the Warren report.
Yeah, so if like me, if you've been through those files, You have to go through the whole fucking 400, if you'll excuse his language. You have to go through them again. And then he said to me, you can make your own index by going to the existing index, and if something's withdrawn, then you'll know it's now released. If you could follow the logic, strangled logic, it's like you make a negative template. Anyway, so I wasn't happy about that. We had a big stand-up argument, and then another younger archivist came down, and that person threw a wobbly, and then I had another stand-up argument about it. But I couldn't get any satisfaction on that. But except to say, one of the file sections, which is really useful to us, is called the, I'm trying to think of that number. It's entry 44. Entry 44 in the Warren Commission collection, which is the office files of staff, and that's people like Coleman, David Slawson, all these other people, the Warren Commission staffers that were working on different aspects of the investigation. And what I found after he'd finished interfiling was some of these boxes, which had been like light as a feather, you couldn't lift. They were so full. There was so much stuff in some of these boxes. But a lot of it's handwritten. With David Slawson stuff, a lot of it is handwritten. It takes time to read it, to try and understand it, you know.
And digest it.
Yeah, it's not easy.
No, I mean, we've got a fair few of Slawson's materials, handwritten notes.
Yeah, but the trouble is, it was when Nara changed over from white
to blue?
Pale blue. And pencil doesn't reproduce very well. You know, nobody thought of that. It's probably saved about 10 cents or something.
Be glad they didn't do it in red,
Yeah.
because then you'd have a problem.
Yeah.
Because black on red will become full on black on a photocopier. That's what they do with it was the Stage. It's a newsletter for actors, and they didn't want anyone to copy it and share it on. So you have to become a member. So they printed everything on red paper with black lettering on it. So if you try to make a Xerox copy and hand it on to your mates, it will look like rubbish. Basically, it's just blacked rubbish, as such.
Yeah.
What else?
Yeah, good question. So that was, I mean, I don't know if you could, I don't think you have that one. This is a Department of Justice list of files. But interestingly, there's a Lee Harvey Oswald file, which I've never seen, which is a 51 file. I have no idea what that is.
You meaning the file or 51 file?
That's the file number.
Right. There's a lot on Hoffa.
I mean, I'd like that to go into the collection for sure, because
Of
it might help.
course.
It might help somebody. You know.
Consider it done. So these are basically, this stuff is supposed to be at Nara.
That's at Justice.
Okay.
I think there are. That would probably be. Well, FBI have a big, huge storage facility at a place called Pickett's Lock, which is in Boyers, Pennsylvania. That's probably where that is. Probably like 10 aircraft hangars.
Filled with drawers, filled with paper. That sounds like heaven to me.
We've got the Ark of the Covenant.
It says here, Oswald, Lee Harvey, 129-11.
Yeah, that's there. The
archives.
file's there.
And then
That
51
file was there, but it got, how would you say?
Removed.
pilfered, disappeared.
No, it got some very late interfiles into it. Steve Tilley did the interfiling with that, and that was done very well, very efficiently.
What does on order stand for? So basically, because the other one, 51-16-1113, says on order.
Yeah, right. Okay, so they obviously wanted to get hold of it, so they've ordered it. Yeah, it's on order. In other words, it's on its way.
Right. So this is from 25 years ago, because it says here August 1997.
Okay.
Ronald
Well, that's the
Harron.
file to, but there's lots of other names there
Yeah.
which people are interested in.
Yeah.
You know, particularly those people that are interested in mafia personalities.
Yeah, Campisi, Trafficante, Giancana, the Hoffa, a lot of Hoffa stuff. Interesting, cool.
I don't know if I keep banging on about this one because I tried to get it and they wouldn't, the last time I was there, so that would have been 2017 or 2018. 2017 or 2018.
2018.
And it's a draft, what they call a green copy. And it's I think it's 8 pages. 8 pages, is it 8 pages? Yeah, 3 copies, 8 pages each, and it's the title is subject alternative drafts. Really, and this is Slawson's. What you're going to have there is a very rough, raw Mexican draft. A lot of people seem to have got very interested in it again. But CIA have absolutely jumped all over this document and will not release it. So, 8 pages there. Oh, I better read you the top. I don't know, if I read it out, it's beyond that.
Okay, that's
so
cool.
It's record group 272, and it's entry 44, office files of staff, and it's W.T. Coleman, W.D. Slawson, box 4, HMFY 95.
So that's the spot where it's at, where it's supposed to be at.
Yeah, that's the way you should find it on the shelves, but it's...
Of course not.
That's an important document because they really are stonewalling that. I'm sure eight pages of somebody's draft about Mexico City. Why are they still doing that? I mean, that's very late to be stonewalling that, isn't it?
It must have some sensitive stuff in
Must
there.
have some sensitive stuff. That's what I think.
So-called dynamite document.
Of course, there's lots of these withdrawal sheets. This is LBJ Library withdrawal sheet.
Oh,
But,
that reminds me. Wasn't this stuff supposed to come out this year, or is it next year?
next year.
It's next year. Oh, just before the 60th. All right. Okay.
I don't know what they're going to do with that. They'll probably try and kick it down the road, I think. Or the family. I mean, they might release it. I don't know.
Well, is it the McCloy papers, or what was it what we discussed about a couple of years ago? Or is it the McCone papers? Because
that's one that's really been butchered.
Yeah, that's one of the things that is in that collection, but it hasn't been released yet. But it's supposed to be released next year.
We don't know that what is amongst the stuff that LBJ locked up for 50 years. The 50-year limit comes up next year. He locked it up in '73, not long before he died. No, it was after he died. The instructions were from LBJ. He gave one batch of tapes and documents to one person and one batch to another person. I didn't have the names.
But this needs looking into, and basically the LBJ library needs to be contacted and go, when exactly is this stuff going to be released as such?
Absolutely,
Because
yeah.
the 5 decades, it's been long enough.
Yeah.
Start coughing up, you lot.
This
Enough's
one
enough.
I was like that, but I'm never really sure whether you posted that or not. If you can remember it.
No, hold on. It's Garrison. No. Oh, this is good. I think Jim D will like this. Jonathan Blackman. Alright, cool. Yeah, I'll be online.
Then I was going through, like, you know, I keep banging on about these because narrow working papers, which is, we've talked about it before probably, you know, where they label something.
So it's not part of the JFK Records Act.
It's not part of anything. It's like in limbo land. It's
like ranking papers.
yeah, but they become narrow working papers. If they're labelled that, it means they're exempt from FOIA, so you can't get hold of this stuff. In other words, NARA have got to review it themselves. Well, you know, I don't know what they're. This one's a 1985 review. I think the last one they did that I know about was 1994 or 95.
28 years ago.
It's a long time. So
it's worth having another ask.
So you know, somebody needs to prod them into reviewing their working papers or releasing them, even.
Mm.
What
it might be an idea for them to justify why they've labelled stuff with working papers for 50 fucking years.
That's twice you're swearing. That's too much. You should make annotations like that on the paper, because I've now found out, I only started looking into this, about how to contact NARA and ask for riffs, this, that and the other, and documentation as such. If you want me to specifically look at that, I will go through the website, because there's an amount of pages that you're allowed to ask per day. So you just have to start to get the train rolling.
If you could ask for narrow working papers, not for 1985, I've looked at 1985, but anything that's more recent narrow working paper reviews, that could be very useful.
With regards to the
you might even
JFK
find stuff
assassination.
from witnesses that you need, you know, which has been locked up for some reason as working papers because it's exempt from FOIA. Somebody's come along and said, don't release that, it's a working paper. So that's a working, but that's one about the entry and exit into Mexico.
This sounds like a bunch of lawyers getting creative with a law that's been put up as such, and then go, oh no, we can go about, we'll call them illegal combatants instead. Oh right, in that case we can lock them up in Gitmo. Boom, like that. Just work your way around it. Have you got your phone on you?
Yep.
Can you put this riff number in and see what this says? It's the 13-digit number on the top. That starts with the 3, then the 5 numbers, and then another 5 numbers. Yep, that one.
So that's your countryman, Altman's.
Willem. Yeah, I actually, I've got a friend of mine who told me that he's got 6 tapes of interviews with Willem Altmans. He said it's in a safe, this, that and the other. But now he's buggered off to Bali, so it's very hard to get hold of him now. But by the way, what's with these blank pages in between? Is that because there's nothing on them?
The photocopy.
Oh, that copy. Okay, fair enough. And then run this one for me as well, please. Thank you. Well, the funny thing is, when I do your documents now, for the last, 2 years now, I've basically run the riffs before I actually start scanning anything in.
I was absolutely staggered by the amount of stuff that...
I know, that's not online. It's ridiculous. It's amazing. I mean, I've mentioned this before. I always thought it was around 25%, but I think it's more. And of course, the ones that don't have a riff, I just scan in anyway. But just did the ones, and I've said this before as well, the ones that are related to Cuba, I say 95% is online, if not more. But a lot of FBI stuff is just nowhere to be found. On top of that, and this is what Joe Biden said as well, Biden said it needs to be scanned in, it needs to be digitized, you know, the collection as such, because I've got the feeling that the stuff that was released in the 90s, yeah, it's available to get, but you don't have a digital copy of it. So I've got a stack of riff sheets, which is 2 inches thick, okay, and it's all not online, not online.
The
So,
Joe Backs.
yeah, well, with Joe Bax, basically, I confer with him because I send him the documents because he keeps track of all the riff numbers, and he's got a spreadsheet, and he puts them in there, and it gives him a really good overview of how many riffs numbers there are, and you know what's missing, this, that, and the other. It gives him, you know, he's the only one that does this, and you might say like, well, that's really nerdy, and it's probably true, Joe, but at the same time, it's very useful.
I think it's very useful, yeah.
To find out, because especially when it comes to documentation hunting and trying to find things as such, you know, so and you know, Mary Farrell is without a doubt the best resource when it comes to documentation. The ARC is giving all the stuff to them, and you know, digitizing, and of course he gets his stuff for himself. Better than the Black Vault, for instance, and there's 1 or 2 more. You know, and I just find all these things that are just like missing and just not there, and a lot from LBJ or from SSCIA, you know, Church Committee, things like that, Schweiker as well, and it's just not there, and there's just not a trace of this stuff. And I'm thinking, you know, Malcolm's just been there at the right time and just basically copying it. And on top of that, like I said, a lot of the stuff from the 90s just hasn't, that was released in the late 90s after the ARB, was never digitized in the first place. And hopefully that will come out, because there's tons of DPD and FBI stuff and so forth on it. And you know, I'm slowly getting organized in the sense that I'm just making a whole list and just gonna, if they allow me to do this daily, I'm just gonna send them 12 riffs a day and just put it in the queue whenever, you know, get hold of it. So, okay, what's next?
I think this is like where they were looking at the Ford Library stuff. And
You've been there?
no, this is the review board, so it's from Chris Barger, and it's material in the Nara Ford collection. And so he's gone down to the Ford Library and looking through the Nara, Ford, Rockefeller commissions
Right.
files, and you know, it's got some interesting comments on that. Particularly the last paragraph.
How comes you haven't been? How comes you haven't been? How comes you haven't been to the Ford Library?
Didn't get round to it.
But which begs me to ask, I know we've had COVID.
I didn't go down. I didn't go down to LBJ Library because all the stuff that was JFK related they sent to Nara up in College Park.
Right.
93 boxes.
And have you got access to them? Did you get access to them?
Anybody? Yeah.
Yeah?
I went through those files. Yeah.
So the JFK related stuff is all at NARA, it's not at the LBJ library?
Yeah.
Okay. By the way...
Well, it is, yeah. They sent copies up, so the original documents are down.
At
There's
LBJ.
a lot of stuff down there,
Right.
which has not been released. That page I gave you was just one withdrawal sheet,
Right.
you know. And there are hundreds of pages of withdrawals.
You haven't been for a while now to Washington. Any plans?
Well, I think it's, from what I hear, it's not too easy at the moment. You have to make appointments, and the number of hours has been curtailed. You can only have one cart for 16 boxes, where you used to have 2 carts, 24 boxes on each. So it's like, it's not what it was. It's Nara is no longer user friendly for anybody visiting in person, unfortunately. I say that with some regret, because at the time, particularly back in the 90s, you didn't realise how lucky you were. You know, to get in to look at the evidence, the original evidence, you know, was really something.
So is that documented Mary Farrell?
That one. Yeah,
Okay, the big one.
the big one is.
I
The other
don't
one,
need that. If it's at Mary Farrell, then
Okay.
I don't need it. And the other one?
No, sir.
That's not out.
No.
And that's the one with the working papers.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. All right, that makes sense. Thank you, Peter.
This is. I was trying to get some ancillary files because what I was trying to get into was at this particular time. This is in 06. I see the dates on it, 21st of June 06. And I think I was trying to get into stuff related to the prisoner release, the Bay of Pigs prisoner release.
Okay.
And so I got this lead to go to the files of Louis Oberdorfer, who was a special assistant to Robert Kennedy. And I did manage to get the files, but they're heavily redacted. And I just wondered whether any of that stuff was released. That's the original finding aid.
Okay. Okay. I'll have a little browse. By the way, I don't know if I ever asked you, after your Dallas chapter in the mid and late 90s, you went for the Cuban thing, yeah? Why and how did you make that actual switch as such?
I think I was talking with Gordon Winslow down in Miami, and I think Gordon said that he felt there was a lot of value in the Cuban stuff. And I think there is, but it's so dense, you know, very difficult to get. Some of the more obscure files, strangely enough, the ones that were kept back, and then they were labelled NBR, nobody relevant, like the accounting files for the Mira Cardona's group.
Yeah. Jury.
What they called not jury, it's another one.
CDC?
CDC could be, yeah. There was a whole swathe of documents relating to what they called the Paula Souza files, which are really accounting files. Now then, I looked at this stuff, and there was some interesting stuff I did find. You know, letters from people. There was a letter from Ernesto Rodriguez Jr., which was quite interesting, to Paula, I think, not Souza, Paula, I think. So there were things like that in there. But then, you know, when I think back, there were a lot of 201 numbers out in the open as well. So, where on a lot of documents you get the names and 201s not linked, in those files they are linked. You can find them. So they're very useful if you're doing that research into the Cuban angle. And I think you know, that's you know, one of the reasons I got into that stuff, because I think there was significant stuff which went both ways. There was a lot of stuff which led into how the CIA operated, how CIA did things, how certain operators, covert operators worked, certain of their people, certain names, you know. So that was interesting to me. But it's like, you know, it's a big subject. I mean,
it's massive.
Larry Hancock and Dave Boylan probably have done more work in that than me. Much more work.
Yeah. Yeah, no, they did a lot of that. But yeah, I found the switch from the Cubans to this agency more
time when I was meeting
more natural than
with Gordon.
Dallas.
Yeah, I was meeting with Gordon.
What happened to Gordon's files?
I think, well, I was offered them. You know, should have bought them because they were for sale. They weren't for. It wasn't a donation. But I think he had every book, every assassination book, every single book, all signed by the authors. I've never seen so many books signed by
well,
authors.
your collection ain't that bad either. I mean, you know, I mean, we saw the books. We sold a lot of them from the collection that you had in the warehouse and all that. I mean, there were a lot of signatures in them too. So.
Oh, good.
There's a lot. Yeah. So.
Well, you know, the way I look at it, they all went to a good home.
Yeah. Run that for me, please. Okay, I'll tell you what. We've been talking for just over an hour. I mean, let's have a break, and we'll continue later on, part 2, and we'll talk some more. So.
We come down. If you want to go down a bit of refreshment.
Yeah, let's do that. All right, we'll talk to everybody later in part 2. Sayonara.